What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Command and Console. My name is Jason. Today we are looking at my favourite PlayStation 2 games ever. This list was pretty difficult to compile, as you can imagine. There's so many great titles on the PlayStation 2 that I've either, forgot, not played, or just don't have in my collection for one reason or another. But these are from my collection. There's one game not in my collection that's on this list that I won't be able to show. I just have to put a picture up. But without further ado, let's get to my favourite PS2 games of all time. Starting off with a couple of honourable mentions in this video. The first game I've spoken about before is Cold Winter. This is one of my favourite first-person shooters on the PS2, and it's a super underrated James Bond-esque adventure, going across the globe, being this kind of secret agent and just being a fucking brutal bastard and killing everything in sight. This game is absolutely savage in its gunplay. The ragdoll physics are brutal and hilarious, and the gore effects in this are quite ahead of its time. You really can just, basically rid someone with bullets to the point where they're just basically a torso with nothing left. Their head's gone, their bodies are gone. It's just brutal stuff. This game is super fun. The story is great as well. I highly recommend this game. That's our first honourable mention, Cold Winter. My next honourable mention is Tenchu, Wrath of Heaven. This is a direct sequel to the original Tenchu Stealth Assassins on the PlayStation. I'm a big fan of that game. I'm a big fan of its prequel game, Tenchu 2, Birth of the Stealth Assassins. Those two games are awesome, and they're not in my collection, so they will be going in my collection eventually. But this one is probably might be my favourite of the bunch. Really good sequel to the first game. It just perfects everything the first two games did with its awesome over-the-top violent stealth system and grappling hook mechanics as well. You do feel like a ninja. You do feel like you live in the shadows in this game. I do love it. Didn't quite make the cut for this list, but it's definitely a game I highly recommend you pick up. It's pretty cheap at the moment as well, so it won't break the bank if you add this to your collection. That's Tenchu, Wrath of Heaven. Great one. My number 10 is going to be Juiced. This is an awesome circuit racing game brought to you by THQ. Very good. It's circuit racing, but it embodies that street racing mentality. Pink slips, juiced up cars, import tuners, everything you'd want from a street racer, like say Need for Speed Underground 2 for example, but it's a circuit racer. I absolutely loved this game back in the day. It still holds up now. It's a great game that blends that kind of, it's the perfect mix of arcade and simulation racing, and it's got I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely love the whole customization part of these kind of games, where you can build up the car of your dreams and make it be the most fast, most beautiful looking machine ever built, basically. This game is one of those. It's so good. Had to be on the list. There's a lot of racing games on this list as well, because I think the PS2 was the perfect era for these kind of racing games, but Juiced is my number 10 here. I absolutely adore this one. I highly recommend you if you've not played it before. You can kind of skip the sequel. The sequel is not as good, nowhere near as good. I do want it for the collection, but it's nowhere near as good. But Juiced 1 is absolutely brilliant. That's Juiced. Next up is my favourite James Bond title of all time. And fun fact, it's not going to be the one you think it is going to be. James Bond 007, Everything or Nothing. There's a big fun fact about this game, that the original Tomorrow Never Dies game on the PS1 was originally going to be called Everything or Nothing. It was developed by Aeon, who literally their name stands for Everything or Nothing, E-O-N. I think EA kind of took that kind of idea and brought it for this game. So this game is pretty much what you would expect from that Tomorrow Never Dies title, but perfected. The third person shooting is fantastic. The driving sequence are exhilarating. The graphics look awesome. This is Pierce Brosnan reprising his role as Bond, which I'm always up for. He's my Bond. I grew up with Pierce Brosnan as James Bond, so I'm always up to see him as James Bond in these video games. This game is great. It's such a fun, action-packed third-person shooter on the PS2, and it's one of my favourites on the system. It's so good. That's James Bond 007, Everything or Nothing. Next up is one of the biggest sequels on the PS2, and that is Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Now, I've got an interesting kind of history of this game. I don't think I've ever been hyped for a sequel as much as this game. I'm a huge fan. I still am a huge fan of the first game, but back when this game was being hyped, I couldn't be more excited because that first game changed my whole outlook for video games. So when Metal Gear Solid 2 was announced, I was super hyped to get back in this, in the boots of Solid Snake and do some stealth espionage action, as they would say. But I remember this coming out, and I remember it being somewhat disappointed with it because you don't play as Snake. They did a switcheroo with this game. You play Snake for the first maybe, I don't know, hour or so. They flip the switch and you become Raiden. You play as Raiden for the remainder of the game. I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with this title because I wanted, like everyone, we wanted to play as Solid Snake. We got a little tease of that with the tanker mission at the beginning of the game, but then you get switched to Raiden and you're on the big shell and you've got to do the whole game with Raiden. As I've grown up, I've become to appreciate this game a lot more. I still think it's a great sequel. It's an amazing sequel to Metal Gear Solid. Is it my favourite in the series? No. I still think in terms of the sequels, I think Metal Gear Solid 3 is probably the strongest sequel. But when it concerns the sequel to Metal Gear Solid, this was as big as it gets in terms of sequels. And I think this game on its own really showcases what the PlayStation 2 can do. It looks amazing now. The HD remasters look as good as they are because Kojima Productions were able to squeeze as much power out of the PS2 as possible to make this game look as good. It's just a marvel to look at. This game is still absolutely fantastic to play now, and I highly recommend Metal Gear Solid 2. If you've not played it, where have you been? Under a rock? Probably. Or been buried under Metal Gear Rex from the first game maybe. I don't know. But yeah, definitely one of my favourites of all time. That's Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Number 7 is Soul Calibur 2. This might be my favourite fighting game of all time. When I think of fighting games, I think of two in particular. One would be Tekken 3 and the second would be Soul Calibur 2. They're always interchangeable, but when it comes to sword and weapon-based combat, I think Soul Calibur 2 is the best of the bunch. Now, I'm picking this one out on PS2 because I think it is the best fighting game on PlayStation 2 in my opinion, and thus it has to be in this list of my favourite games ever. This game is quite wonderful that there's 3 different versions of this game that came out that were specifically exclusive for each system. So each game got an exclusive character. So the PS2 got Heihachi Mishima from Tekken, and the GameCube version got Link from Legend of Zelda, and the Xbox version got Spawn from the Spawn comic book series. Not saying that the PS2 is the best version, but in this PS2 video, it had to be in this list. It's just a perfect fighting game. It's got tons of unlockables, awesome characters to choose from, a really cool weapons master mode, which feels like a kind of almost like an RPG fighting game where you unlock new weapons and you unlock new abilities. So much content for the price. And I don't think fighting games have been quite the same since the early 2000s. I think once microtransactions and fighter packs and all this added bullshit came into them, I think they've lost what made them great before. So yeah, this is my favourite fighting game of all time, but it's definitely one of the best PS2 games ever. That's Soul Calibur 2. Next up, we did mention this game earlier, Need for Speed Underground 2. This might be one of the best open world racing games ever. Might be one of the best arcade games ever. It's just so fun. The amount of racing in this, from drag racing to drift to just general circuit races, are all fun. The way you can build up your car and make it look as bling as possible is awesome. And yeah, you can make your car look like an absolute bloody epileptic's nightmare with tinted windows, underglow, the brightest headlights of all time. It's just, you can make your car look as shiny as possible. The level of customization here is so satisfying, and this game still holds up today. It's still fun to play, and yeah, it might be a game I'm going to go back to eventually just to go through it all the way through and beat it again, because this game took over my life when it came out back in the day. What a great expansion of the first one, taking that open world into an open city and really kind of nailing that customization street racing side of it. And the racing in general is just super fun, so this had to be on the list. like I said, the PS2 era was probably the best era for racing games in my opinion, and Need for Speed Underground 2 is no exception. That's Need for Speed Underground 2. What a game. Number 5 is just a super nostalgic game that I played tons of back in the day. It's similar to Underground 2, where it took the previous game and expanded upon it, made it sort of almost this like open world, open map experience. I'm talking about a fighting game called Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3. This game, like a lot of these games back in the day when I was a young teenager, took over my life. I'm a massive Dragon Ball Z fan. I grew up with it on Toonami, watching it every day at 5 PM after school. Absolutely obsessed with it. You could say I'm still obsessed with it now as a late 30s man. I still love Dragon Ball. I still love Dragon Ball Z. I can't wait for the new anime to come out, Dragon Ball Daima. It should be cool. Akira Toriyama's last ever thing he really kind of had hand in producing. It's going to be a bittersweet series, that is, Dragon Ball Daima. But anyway, back to this game. I love Dragon Ball Z Budokai. I love Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2. Budokai 2 probably has a bit more of a nostalgic sentimental value to me, because I played loads of that game. But this game came out and it was a game changer in terms of this series. It really gave us like everything we could want from a Dragon Ball Z game. Awesome cel-shaded graphics, an open world to explore. You actually can get the Dragon Radar and actually hunt for the Dragon Balls. And when you do get all 7 Dragon Balls, it gives you an option to choose unlockable. So the way you unlock stuff in this game is by finding the Dragon Balls. It's so cool. The open world is cool. You can actually like sense ki in the world and go to points of interest on the map and have secret fights that you might only find on at certain points in the game if you kind of sense for ki. It's got loads of extras in there, like you can have fusions we never saw between 2 characters, just goofy, silly stuff like that. Introduced GT characters, GT stuff like Super Saiyan 4 Goku here on the front. This game was a massive game changer for me, and I played loads of it. I love it. It's one of the best games on the PS2 period. It's up there in the upper echelons in this list, as you can see. I absolutely love this game. That's Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3. Number 4 is another racing game from a massive series that I absolutely adore. And it might be my favourite in the series. It's my favourite one on the PS2 anyway. Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec. This game was absolutely unreal when it came out on PS2 back in the day. I had never seen cars look so real in my life. I never thought I could play a game that looked this good. This was the pinnacle of cutting edge visuals when it came out, and I was utterly hyped for it. I'm a big fan of the first 2 Gran Turismo titles. Gran Turismo 2 was a big deal for me. It was basically the closest thing we would get to pretty much a motorsport RPG. It was very much like build yourself up, pick out your cars, do races, and Gran Turismo 3 was a massive evolution of that. Pretty much more of the same, but graphics were prettier, they had more cars in it, they had tons of events to do, and yeah, it's so much fun, man. Chasing to get all the licenses was super challenging, but super satisfying because it allowed you to enter more races in the end game and in the later game. And yeah, there's so much here that I just love to pieces, that I feel like everyone needs to play this one. If you've got a PS2 and you love racing games, you probably already own this. Some would argue Gran Turismo 4 kind of perfected what this did. And I love Gran Turismo 4 as well, don't get me wrong, but I feel like Gran Turismo 3 was such a leap, such an evolution of Gran Turismo 2. I could not have it not be on this list. It's one of the best racing games ever. It's one of my favourites of all time. When it concerns simulation racing, it might be the best ever in my opinion. That's Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec. Number 3 is another racing game. This is for me the greatest racing game of all time. It's never been topped. It will never be topped. It is the greatest racing game ever made, and it was on the PS2, and thus it's one of the greatest PS2 games ever made. Burnout 3 Takedown. What can I say about this game that hasn't been said by numerous people before? It's so exhilarating to play. The sense of speed is amazing. The sense of control is just perfect. The amount of content is absolutely staggering, and yeah, it's just one of those games where you just want to go event to event to event. It's just, it captivates you to keep playing. It's so fun to play. The crash mode is exhilaratingly fun. How much damage can you cause in a massive pile-up? What a fun mode that was. This game just has everything I want from a racing game. It still holds up to date. It's so good to play. Yeah, I can't talk about it enough, man. It's that good, man. The visuals look great for the time. It looks great for the PS2. The soundtrack is incredible. One of my favorite soundtracks in a video game ever. It's got some great songs in this as well. Yeah, Burnout 3, it's never going to be topped, right? Never. We've had Burnout Revenge since then. That's a good follow-up, but I don't think it met what this did. We've had Burnout Paradise, which I think is a fantastic open world racing game. Really good game when it concerns the spirit of Burnout, but it was missing something. And this game just has everything for me in a racing game. It's absolutely perfection, and I absolutely adore it. That's Burnout 3 Takedown. We're down to our number 2. This game is a sequel, one of the greatest sequels ever made for me. As you know, guys, if you watch the channel for any length of time, I adore Capcom as a developer, but I also adore the Onimusha series. This game is one of their best games on PS2, one of the best sequels ever made. I adore it. It might not be the one you're thinking of. I'm talking about Onimusha 3. This game kind of basically perfected what Onimusha was. It was a demon slaying action game, samurai, feudal Japan, drenched in, you know, Japanese folklore. But this one, it took the fight into modern day. So you play as both Samanosuke and a character played by Jean Reno, the awesome French actor that everyone loves. Yeah, this game is so good. The combat is exhilarating, the graphics are great for the time, and it has one of the best intro movies ever. Like, the intro CG cinematic is unbelievable for the time. This game has everything for me. I absolutely adore it. I was tempted to put the first game on this list, but pound for pound, when it concerns like how good this was compared to the first one, I think this one just edges it out of the first one to me. I love the first game, don't get it wrong. I got loads of nostalgia for that first original Onimusha game, but something about Onimusha 3, it's one of the best on the system. It's so good, pound for pound. It's just the best in the series. If you've not played Onimusha's games before, I highly recommend them. They are that, you know, that classic Resident Evil-esque fixed camera angles, but they're samurai action games where you fight with swords and bows and other such stuff. You kill demons. It's awesome. Now, for my number 1, I don't have it in my collection. It is a big hitter for the collection, but I think it's my favourite game on the PS2. I'm talking about Silent Hill 2. This game might be the scariest game I've ever played in my life. I remember playing through it and I actually just like, I don't want to walk down that corridor because I'm actually terrified. I'm absolutely soiling my pants right now. I'm so scared. I do not want to play it. But this game has atmosphere down to a perfected science. It's just unbelievably atmospheric, thick with just like dread and bleak suspense. This is survival horror done pretty much perfectly for the PS2 generation. Even though I love Resident Evil, I don't think Resident Evil kind of met the heights of Silent Hill 2 on PlayStation 2. You know, I could have included Code Veronica X, for example, but I don't think that game has anything near the quality of Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 for me is the greatest game on PS2, in my opinion. It's the game that I want the most for my PS2 collection, and it's the one that is eluding that collection for the longest time. And the longer I wait to pull the trigger, the more expensive it will become. But for me, no price is a bad price for that game. Silent Hill 2 has everything I want from a survival horror game. It has great item management. It has a great protagonist that you actually want to see where his story goes. And also, it has some absolute terrifying abominations that you've got to either avoid or kill, or somehow avoid and kill at the same time. It is horror perfection to me, and the fact that Konami has not really met that level of quality for a long time. I mean, the Silent Hill 3 was great. Silent Hill 4 is a really underrated title that no one really gives as much credit as it deserves. But since those, you know, heyday titles, Silent Hill has been in a bit of a downturn. I don't know, I'm just a bit bummed out about where Silent Hill is right now. I'm sure we're going to get the remake of Silent Hill 2, but from what I've seen in that game, it looks a bit jank, and it might not be, you know, up for the hype. It might not meet the hype, I suppose. So I'm keeping my, you know, reservations kind of low for that remake. But when it concerns the original Silent Hill 2, nothing comes close to it on PS2. It's the greatest PS2 game ever made, in my opinion, and I think it's one of the best horror games ever. So that's it, guys. That is my favourite PS2 games of all time. Be sure to comment down below and let me know your favourite PS2 games ever. Let me know if you've played any of these games as well and your opinions on them. And as always, let's continue to build a games collection.